Good afternoon, I think. This has been a wild ride. I've been the voice off on the side the last couple of our sessions, and
now you've been apocalypsed.
I've been apocalypsed now. I've been revealed. See, you might have thought that Daniel was saying that he killed me. So, based on what the term apocalypse means to a lot of people, but it should mean just one thing. It really is kind of aggravating that the term apocalypse has become universally known as the final destruction. But that just is not the case. That's not what the apocalypse means. So it adds a little bit to the difficulty of trying to communicate the message of John's apocalypse. And it really is strange. Just think about it. Nobody, if you say apocalypse to anybody, say, well, you know, I've just had an apocalypse. They're going to say, oh my God, what happened? Yeah. They're not going to say, oh, really? What did you learn? Mm-hmm. Because that's what an apocalypse really is. It's an unveiling, a revealing. And I remember when Kate Benham was first involved in the gospel revolution. Oh, her songs, just Google Kate Benham. You can actually see her little video that we did in my living room while she was there. A lot of her songs were written right there at my home in Houston. And she did a little song that says, I have been apocalypsed.
I love it.
And so a lot of other really sweet songs. But this has been a real journey for me. Of course, it's been a delight having Daniel here. I think that most of you have seen that there is a real wonderful synergy between us. Kind of love the guy too. But there's a real synergy between us that we work good together. We just really do. Daniel brings out the best in me. I bring out the worst in him. And but that's just the way some things have to be. So what we've done so far, I think, is you know, who wants to nominate us for the Nobel Peace Prize? That's what I want to know. Because I don't know of anything that has brought a clarity to something that's brought more destruction to this earth than the revelation. And to this day, it is bringing destruction. To this moment, it is bringing destruction to people's lives. And we have gone into here, and you might say we've taken the sting out of what people call the apocalypse. And it really wasn't us who took it out. We're just pointing out who took the sting out of the apocalypse. And Jesus. We can't say the name enough. He wasn't just a good man who died on the cross. He died for the sin of the world, and he took all of God's anger and all of God's wrath. But Mike, why was God so angry? We are covering those subjects, and we are looking into all of the whys. But you know, when God himself is angry, the first thing you need to do is accept the fact that he was. It was a major step for the universe when I first came out back in the 70s, the late 70s, and taught the gospel of peace for the first time. I will never forget, I was telling Daniel the story about it when I was pastoring a church in the late 70s. And from there, the gospel revolution was born out of that one single teaching. And of course, if God's not angry, the question came, why is he not angry? Because if he hates sin and he's not angry, what does that do with the issue of sin? So you see, that's why the gospel of peace is the bedrock of this gospel revolution in Mike Williams Ministries, is because the unveiling, if you will, the apocalypse of the gospel of peace led to all the other questions. Just think of the cascade of questions that come down from that a once angry God is no longer angry. How? Why? Not question. Most people are so hung up about questioning whether or not he was. You have to dismiss like 75% of the Hebrew scriptures to say that he wasn't. You have to dismiss every writer of the New Testament who affirms, yes, he was. And some of them still believed that he was still angry and going to get even angrier, such as Peter. And which we found out that, you know, Jesus was evidently running short on material when he was trying to get John to write those letters to the churches, and he just had to quote Peter over and over and over. That blew me away.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I did not know that, but as we looked at those terms and then did just a very little bit of research, that's what we found was, my gosh, this is a direct quote from Peter. What does Jesus need to quote Peter for? So that was very, very revealing for us. I'm not going to make a point of everything that we've gone through, but it has really been quite amazing. This is a revelation of Jesus Christ, an apocalypse. I'm wanting to try to get you used to that term in a positive way. The revelation of Jesus Christ is the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. These aren't two separate terms. It's just one is the Greek term and the other is the English term. Revelation is apocalypse. Apocalypse is revelation. And it is just a revelation. It doesn't mean particularly this one. Is just, that's what that word means. But to understand this revelation of Jesus Christ, see, we've had to, as Daniel laid out for us so well, that we had to learn what the parameters are that are laid out in the book. And inside those parameters, it's like anything. You have to establish parameters to understand or especially build something. If you're going to build an understanding, it's like building a house. You have to put a stake over on that corner, a stake on that corner, a stake on that corner, and a stake on that corner. Unless you got a garage, and then you got another corner, and another corner, and another corner. And but it's then once the stakes are set, then you take a little ball of yarn and or twine and go around the stakes, and then you get the guy to come in and dig the trenches. And then the guys, after you dig the trenches, come in and lay the blocks. And after the guys lay the blocks, then they lay out the rooms. And then, because I watched my own home being built in Houston, and that was a lot of fun. I was just telling Daniel about that. And then they know where the pipes go, and then they know where this needs to go. And but that's true with even a framework of thought. You need to know what the parameters are. You say, well, Mike, what if you have the parameters wrong? Then what you're learning will change those parameters. And that's how I learn. I don't know how everybody else learns, but that's why I appreciated so much Daniel helping us lay this out. One of the things that Daniel laid out was that this is the same story repeated many times with different imagery. And gosh, has that been delightfully true and boringly true. And we want to warn you about that, but we don't want you to get complacent in the middle of this teaching, because every time we use a different imagery, we learn a little bit more about what Jesus actually did. Because each imagery demands just a little bit different view of the story because of the imagery. And it's just like laying out parameters. If you lay out a different imagery, then the imagery has to represent how the story goes, and the story will represent the imagery. So that's what we're having here. We're not coming up with our own view of the apocalypse, of the revelation. We're doing our best to let it define itself. This is the earmark of the gospel revolution in Mike Williams Ministries, is that we always allow the text to define itself by context and content. And yes, we look at the Greek words. But what we don't do is what Daniel and I both were good at back in the Word of Faith days, is find a Greek word and build a whole doctrine around it. Mm-hmm. That we don't do. Man, I had some good sermons though. And I just had to dump them. But, you know, some of the things that made me the most popular were amongst the people in the Word of Faith movement were teachings that I did by these single word doctrines built around one single verse. But that's where 45,000 denominations came from, is a single verse and a single understanding, sometimes even of just a single Greek word. So this experience truly is unique in my 52 years in the ministry. Yeah, I've been in the ministry longer than this guy's been alive by several years. And now I'm talking to him about, you know, now when you're 70, this is what you'll be doing. And I said, you know, you'll be talking about this weekend.
Yeah.
And I know you will, Daniel. I know that this weekend of this conference, this is going to stay with Daniel as long as at least, I don't know if he's going to be as brilliant and bright as I am at 70. But, boy, I shouldn't have said that. They say you jinx yourself. We don't believe those things. So we're really, really happy to have those parameters laid out as Daniel has helped us to understand these segments within the perimeters. Now, those parameters that have been given to us is the day. The day is repeated many times. The hour. The half hour, we saw that. And one of the most impressive things to me in the process of this is that silence in heaven. And we realize, of course, even just by the demonstration, the angels, all these angels, you know, you don't have your own angel. I'm sorry. We've looked from high and low, from Genesis through Revelation, and nobody has an angel. All angels were assigned to minister to Christ. And that's back to before the foundation of the world. Now, we don't know exactly when angels were created, but we assume they were created before the foundation of the world. At least that's my perspective, at least, of that. And they were always there to minister to Christ. And even in the different manifestations that we see of him throughout the Hebrew scriptures. And then, of course, when he was here. And remember the temptation that he went through with the devil, and Satan tempted him and said, you know, throw yourself down, because it is written how that the angels will catch you, even if you should dash your foot against a stone. Mm-hmm. And so we've thought about that. You know, they were like the bodyguards, like the Secret Service assigned to make sure that an individual is protected. And I've seen stories about people who have felt they failed to do that, and it's like their life is over because their whole identity is in this protective services. And then this silence in heaven of the angels standing back and having to refrain from doing what everything in their being was geared to do, and that is to minister to the Christ and to stand back and allow this to happen. So a lot happened, way more than what we even teach on. We teach a whole lot about what happened during the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And we try very hard to make sure that we find the anchor of that in the Hebrew scriptures. If we don't find it in the Hebrew scriptures, we don't care who said it in the New Testament. It's not getting into our teachings. We might refer to it to show you that it's there, but it's not going to become something that we rely on as truth. So what we have coming up is several other parameters, And one of those is this 1,000 years. I know you've heard about the 1,000 years, and these are coming up not in this session, but the 1,000 years. There's two things: 1,000-year reign of Christ and 1,000 years that Satan is locked away. You're going to be very surprised at the context of this and where this actually fits. The power of knowing those parameters, then all we have to do is let this speak for itself. But you do have to do enough research to know, and we didn't set these parameters. This revelation sets its own parameters. We didn't set these. We found them here, and then we backed up and began to view this from those parameters and let these texts begin to speak to us. Even as Don Bartlett, and I've told you many times, even in these sessions, that in 2014, Don Bartlett blew my mind. And I realized that the only way that the revelation was going to have credibility is if the letters are not a part of the revelation. And I think we have shown you very clearly how that is very powerfully not a part of this revelation. And the redundancy as to how they actually tied it all together. Now, at the end of this entire revelation, they make an attempt to tie some of that was in the first of it onto the tail end of it to try to give validity to the first of it. It's very clearly there. We're looking forward to sharing that with you. I'm getting way too far ahead. And Daniel and I are going to be going through these next few chapters. We're thinking that we will go through these, and then there'll be one more session, just in case this goes too long for some reason. Then we might have this one and two more, but right now it's scheduled to be this one and one more. This will be the longest conference that we have ever had as far as the teaching is concerned, and each and every session has been packed full. So Daniel, where do we start now on this one?
We are in Revelation chapter 16. We ended last time in chapter 15, which kind of builds up to the 6 vials of wrath. And we were introduced to the 7 angels. I'm sorry, the 7 vials of wrath. We were introduced to the 7 angels. And chapter 15 closes this way and says, "And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled."
And that's talking about the temple in heaven. Because,
right, yeah.
you know, Hebrews explains to us that the temple on earth was simply a shadow, a type and a shadow and a pattern after the things that were in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, shall we dive into...
Let's do it.
The bowls, the vials.
Let's dive into the bowls before the bowls dive into us.
Revelation chapter 16, verse 1. "And I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, Go your way and pour out the vials of wrath of God upon the earth. And the first went out and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, upon them which worshipped his image." Now, we had gone over the beast and what these represent. And these are, from what we learned from Daniel, these are kingdoms. And these are kings. And so these are people who succumbed to these kingdoms. Yeah. But the end of Daniel chapter 7 is that all these kingdoms were brought into the kingdom of God. The kingdoms of man have become the kingdoms of our God.
Whether these people took the mark or not.
Yeah.
And that's where people get hung up. They get hung up on the mark of the beast. But the reason they do it, Daniel, is because they see it as a future event. Mm-hmm. And so they've got to figure out the mark of the beast. How do you get it? Who gives it? And and who's passing it out, and is it then the chip, we're going to have a chip in our forehead, or everything is running rampant about this. It's amazing how this topic stays current and has stayed current for 2,000 years.
Yeah. Wow. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as blood of dead men, and every living soul died in the sea. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of waters, and they became blood. And I heard the angels of the water saying, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and was and shall be, because thou hast judged thus. For they have shed the blood of the saints and the prophets, and they have given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. And I heard another out of the altar say, Even so, Lord, God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him. You notice how that keeps repeating itself. The power was given. We've seen that in the seals as well, that they were given power. Then what we found out, a lot of these didn't have the opportunity to use their power because someone stepped in the way. That's someone being Jesus. Verse 9, and men were scorched with great heat and blasphemed the name of God, which have power over these plagues, and they repented not to give him glory. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. Ooh.
These are stubborn people.
And they blasphemed the God of heaven because their pains and their sores, and they repented not for their deeds. And the sixth angel poured out the vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the king of the east might be prepared. And I saw unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits. Well, that's interesting because we had, just to show that this story is repeated, the last time we read about the beast and the false prophet, they were thrown into the lake of fire.
Yeah.
We're going to learn about the dragon here. Spoiler alert, he gets thrown in there too. But we've already seen the beast and the false prophet thrown in.
And now they're back again.
Yeah.
But they're not really back again. It's just the story is being told again.
Yep. Verse 14, for they are all spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and the whole world, to gather them for the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into place called the Hebrew tongue Armageddon.
Ooh. Well, that's a big word, isn't it?
Yeah, Armageddon.
I'm not sure how many places that this is mentioned, but we're going to learn more about it right here. One thing I'd like to touch on is that it's amazing how that Christianity teaches that God makes people sick and does things to them, like makes your car break down and things, so you'll turn to him. That's not according to these guys. I mean, these guys were being burned. These guys were being stung and begging to die, but anything but submit to God. It's like, it obviously knocks a little bit of a hole into the doctrine, which we know isn't true anyway, that God would use these things to make you turn, because he would have learned here it didn't work. Now, this is all the vials. And where did we get down to in this chapter?
I am on 17.
And I'm sorry, I've just lost my entire Bible. Hold on one second.
Poof, it went away.
Bam, there it is. It just went through an apocalypse. And what verse did you say?
I finished 16.
Okay. So what we let's continue with these vials, and then we want to share some things with you about this terminology of vials. But we might as well get all these vials out.
These vials.
Before we say anything about the entirety of this subject in relationship to the work of the cross.
Verse 17, and the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. And remember, we heard that earthquake again too. Such as not seen since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the city of the nations fell. And great Babylon came into remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceedingly great.
So Daniel, is it safe to say that this, number one, is not going to happen?
Yes.
Why is this not going to happen?
Because the revelation is not about the future.
The revelation is not about the future. And we can say with quite certainty that all the mountains haven't been removed, and there's things that are written here that we know has not happened.
Yeah.
There's some that you could kind of say, well, it could have happened, but some of this is the total annihilation and the existence almost of the planet itself.
Right.
And since we're here, it's kind of not, we know it didn't happen. There's going to be some places as we read through here that makes reference to a lot of nations. And that's when the perimeter is going to come in of the 1,000 years. And you'll see how that takes place when we get into that arena. Now this is talking about these vials. The term vial simply means a cup. It doesn't make any difference, even the Greek word makes no difference. A cup is a cup is a cup. There's different Greek words for that because of the way that the cup is being used actually. Or the way it's shaped in particular. But what is the good news about all of these cups of wrath?
Well, the big one that comes to mind is when Jesus was praying in the garden before he went to the cross. What was his prayer? Lord, if this cup would pass from me.
And what cup was he talking about?
The cup of wrath.
Yeah. It was indeed the cup of wrath, and there's one of the prophets in the scriptures talk about how that cup was mingled with the blood of the martyrs and the blood of the saints and all of this, and the blood of the prophets, I think, is actually what it says. And this was the anguish that Jesus went through in the Garden of Gethsemane. Remember when he was trying to get the disciples to pray with him? What was he praying about? You see, it was not required. I get a little upset with people being dismissive about what Jesus did on the cross because they say no loving father would do that to his son. But you have to understand that this was not a decision that God made by himself for sure. Mm-hmm. This plan was made by God and Jesus before the foundation of the world. So this is an event that they both expected. They both knew was going to happen before God said, let there be light. Now, what we're doing there is accepting that fact, and we'll let the facts fill in the things that we don't understand. But we're not going to change the facts because of the part we don't understand in between. That just is not a very wise thing to do. And, that God would never do that. Don't tell me God ever did something like that. God wouldn't do that to his son. But remember, Jesus laid down his own life. And this was not God doing this to him. This was his choice. Why else would he be praying and sweating as though it were great drops of blood about whether or not he was going to drink this cup or not? Mm-hmm. And he knew it was the Father's will, but he didn't have to do that. Wow. And but he chose to do that. You know why he chose it? Because of the great love which he had for you and I and the entire planet. This is how God demonstrated his love to us. In it while we were yet sinners. And Paul's talking about the people that were alive because, you see, you weren't sinners. Mm-hmm. God, we want to get that across to the world. We live in a whole new cosmos. And how new is it? It's so new. When you were born in righteousness. You were not born in sin. And some of the comments that Paul makes and Apollos and Peter, James, and John about having been in sin before. Why? Because they were in sin before. Because they were born in sin under the first covenant, under the first Adam. But the last Adam has caused us all, for 2,000 years, there hasn't been a sinner on earth. Mm. Now, that's an apocalypse. Yeah. That is a true apocalypse. There hasn't been a sinner on this earth in 2,000 years. Why? Because Jesus, one of the reasons is because Jesus, in that prayer and in that communion with the Father, decided on his own that he would indeed be the one who would consume. Did you see the chapter we just read? That's what Jesus knew. Mm. Was going to be in that cup. Mm. And he was going to take that into himself. I doubt that the physical suffering, as much as it was anything compared to the torture that was being internalized by drinking this into himself. I don't think when he cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I don't think it was because of the nails in his hands or the crown of thorns on his head. Neither was it in the one in his feet. But I think he was crying out, my God, why did it seem that God had forsaken him? Because wrath connotes separation. Wrath itself connotes that that one is parted from God. You have to be everything that Jesus would have known about would have been that this happens to people who God is displeased with and has turned his back on. So, of course, it would not have been the physical crucifixion that Jesus went through that would have invoked this question out of him. It would have been, you just read, we just read to you, and if you're reading along, Revelation chapter 16, and this is just one particular imagery that is repeated time and time. So what is the imagery telling us about? It's telling us about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mm.
There's good news in the Revelation.
It's good news. It's good news for us. It's good news for everybody. It's good news for the whole world because this didn't happen. Mm. And even more importantly, as Daniel said, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm.
Okay, chapter 17, the woman and the beast. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and he talked to me, saying, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, and whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me into the spirit, into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness in her fornication. And her forehead and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. I kind of wonder too.
It's a big woman.
Yeah. I think the big thing to point out here is that the name that was written on her was Babylon the Great.
Yeah.
Babylon plays a part in the Hebrew scriptures. And, it's always portrayed as this enemy against the children of Israel. They were always against that. It has a representation like Egypt.
They were sold into bondage into Babylon.
Yep, they had the exile. They were exiled to there.
That was a big part of their history, was their exile into Babylon.
Yep. Verse 7, and the angel said unto me, Wherefore, this is the King James Version, wherefore didst thou marvel?
See, don't you like the King James?
Didst thou?
Wherefore didst thou?
I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So now he's going to explain what they are. The beast that thou saw was and is not. What? It was and is not. And it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. We seem to be repeating the story here.
We are.
And go into perdition. So he came out of the pit and he's going to go get destroyed too.
And the word perdition, what does that mean? Let's see.
Perish, is that right?
Yeah, it means to go into destruction, to ruin, total loss, waste.
So he came out, but he's about to get wasted.
But he's going to get wasted. I think I would too. Do that.
And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. And when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is, and he is the man, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. Yeah, it is a big woman. She sits on top of 7 mountains. And the 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is yet to come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. We've seen that repeated. And the beast that was and not is, even he is the 8th, and is out of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings for 1 hour. That's interesting.
There is the term 1 hour again.
And the kings only have power for 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. What are they going to do? Verse 14. They shall make war with the Lamb.
Yeah.
I would think that it would mean that war is going to happen when they're a kingdom during 1 hour.
Yeah, a 1 hour, a coming together of all the powers that be, if you will, against the Lamb.
Wow.
For this to be carried out, the crucifixion, this was the Son of God. This is God and man in one. And I think really all it's explaining here, Daniel, is the forces that had to come together to bring about the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah.
Even though it was preordained and prophesied. The term in Isaiah where he says, and I've created the waster to destroy. That bothers some people, but the fact of it is that even some of these destructive powers were used in the plan of God.
Yeah.
To see that these things were fulfilled for the benefit of the entire human race.
I don't remember which one it was, but I do remember that there was one particular angel that we read about, that he was prepared for a specific day, a specific month, a specific
Yes.
hour. That was his whole existence,
Yeah.
was for that time. They shall make war with the Lamb, verse 14, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and they that are with him are called chosen and faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. They didn't like her.
Yucky.
For God hath put in their hearts, and here's what you were just saying, for God had put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And the woman which thou sawest is the great city, it said Babylon earlier, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
There's, believe me, I don't know how many book of Revelations that you've set through, as they call it, but many people lean toward that this is the Catholic Church. In Rome, there's 7 mountains. That's how Rome is set up, as the 7 hills of Rome. And so people really that have it in for the Catholic Church. We don't have it in for the Catholic Church. We have it in for the Catholic doctrine. And we think they ought to sell all those statues and give them to the poor, to be honest with you. And the wealth and everything that is connected to that. But because this is not a future event, this is a revelation of the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus' testimony began, according to Jesus, before the foundations of the world. And his testimony was wrapped up in the death, burial, and resurrection. So that's a long time to have a testimony. And believe me, his testimony is what we are wanting to share with the world. I know I got caught up in trying to share my testimony, which I'm going to be direct with you. It was a lie. But that's what most testimonies are. Most of them are lies. Most of them are exaggerations because we found some place to fit. If you no longer are this, if you're no longer that. And when you've suffered the rejection because of who and what you are, and somebody prays over you and tells you now you're free, you just go along with it. I mean, rejection is a powerful, powerful thing. And also acceptance is a powerful thing. So when you go from the rejection and then you have the testimony and you get the acceptance, you can't turn around and tell the truth again. You're a liar forever. And that's what I decided. I may have been a liar for a while, but I can't be a liar forever. So we left those lies behind. But that is where a lot of people leave this, is with the Catholic Church for sure. But this is the testimony of Jesus Christ.
And I love the way it ends there, is that all of this will happen until the words of God shall be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's already done.
Well, that's what we know from the gospel, is that God's will has been done. That's what Paul taught and Apollos both. So this is, so what is this? It's called good news. But boy, I tell you, once the bad news starts, there's no good news in the bad news. If you do not understand that the good news is that all of these things were culminated in the will of God. And we know that the will of God was that Jesus would take the sin of the whole world upon himself. So we are not relegating this to the cross. God himself, and by the choice of Jesus Christ himself, also relegated these things to be fulfilled at the cross. We didn't do that. That was God in his ultimate plan before the foundation of the world. Jesus was in on that plan, according to Jesus, before the foundation of the world. And this is simply what we're looking at the culmination of.
Okay, chapter 18. After these things, I saw another angel.
Uh-oh.
Man, these angels are busy. I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful birds. You got to watch out for them hateful birds.
Yeah, well, they got an app for Angry Birds. So.
For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she has rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she has filled with her to double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she has said in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am no widow, and I will see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day. One day.
Another one day.
Death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her.
You know, the one thing that we see in here also is God validating retribution from others upon her, upon this beast. And the thing that we know from the gospel is that retribution has been put away, not only from God, but also the issue of forgiveness. You know, before Jesus went to the cross, he said, if you don't forgive, God won't forgive you. And then in Paul's teachings after the cross and his understanding of this incredible work that we are telling you that all of this was taken away at the cross, Paul taught that you and I should forgive one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven us. So the thing that one of the things we see here is that retribution is in the cards. But after the cross, retribution is no longer in the plan of anything that involves God.
Verse 9, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her. Am I saying that right? Deliciously?
Deliciously.
Wow, that's a delicious life. Shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So she's going to fall in today, but she's going to be judged within an hour.
Yeah.
And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth the merchandise any more, the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen, the purple and the silk and the scarlet and all thy wood, and manner of vessels of ivory, and manner of vessels of precious wood, and brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and
not
oil.
leaving anything out there, right?
No, it's all detailed here. Fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. And the fruits of thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all of the things which were dainty and godly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of the torment, the weeping, and the wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches have come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and many as trade by the sea stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto the great city? And they cast dust upon their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, the great city wherein we were made rich, that had ships in the sea by reason of her coastlines, for in 1 hour she is made desolate.
It's pretty persistent about the 1 hour. And the thing that we know is that throughout prophecy, it spoke of this hour of destruction, the hour when the Lord would come. The hour is repeated. So what John is seeing here in the Revelation is behind the scenes of the crucifixion. Remember where John is. Now, Daniel explained that to you very well. John he's not moved. He's still standing there in front of the cross and what's happening on the cross. And suddenly he hears the sound of a trumpet from behind him, which would have come from the temple. And the cross is in front of him. And suddenly the heaven opens and says, come up here. None of that, all those letters thing is even a part of the revelation of John. And so this has gotten really wordy. It's gotten very detailed. But how would you expect anything else going on other than in the physical of Jesus's death, burial, and resurrection? Then everything is happening in the realm of the spiritual, in heaven, and everything that was going to be happening is what John is seeing. John didn't come out of this living in fear. John didn't come out of, goodness, if anybody would have gotten this revelation of all these horrible things to come, I mean, goodness, a person might just go in their life. But John didn't come out of this like that. This would have been something that would have caused great rejoicing for John when all of this was revealed to him.
And that's interesting because when Daniel saw it, he was terrified. Yeah, he wrote about it and he was terrified about what he saw.
Yeah, because Daniel didn't get to see that this is the end.
Yep.
He saw it from the beginning and didn't get to see the way that it would culminate at the end.
Wow. Well, a different vantage point.
Yes.
And that's the vantage point that we're looking from, and that's why we're happy to announce to you all of these things.
Yes, this big woman sitting on 7 mountains.
Verse 20, Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you. I was thinking about that, those are the Hebrews 11 people who cried out, avenge us, avenge us.
Yes.
And this is God doing his work. And a mighty angel took a stone like a great milestone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of the harpers and the musicians and the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman, and whatsoever crafts he be, shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of the milestone shall be heard no more in thee. And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all the nations deceived. And in her found the blood of the prophets and the saints and all who were slain upon the earth.
Well, that's got us up through chapter 18. Daniel, do you think that this is possibly a view of a spiritual Babylon instead of like a physical Babylon?
Yeah, I've thought about that too. You know, in Isaiah chapter 14, when it talks about Lucifer, it actually calls Lucifer the king of Babylon.
Oh, yes.
So
okay.
if
it would be a spiritual city.
Yeah, so if and there certainly is in the Bible, there certainly is both.
Babylon.
Yeah, there is a Babylon. But if this is a spiritual sense, and if that beast is Lucifer, the old serpent, the devil, you know, it would certainly fit into that.
So wrapping this up here, and we're at 18, so we have 19, 20, and 21 to go. I'm going to be doing that. Daniel's going to be the voice on the side and helping me get through that. This really has had to be a tag team effort on every level, because the volume of information here, the intricacies of these understandings of these small things that change everything. We've had to kind of remind each other as we go, because each of us by ourselves would have not been able to really present this to you in a way that it would all fit together. So now we just did more imagery for these chapters 16, 17, and 18. But what is the conclusion of all of these imageries? And why do we keep hearing the same terminology?
It's telling the same story.
It's telling the same story. That's just very obvious that it's the same story. This is a big breakthrough in the understanding and even the attempt to understand the revelation. Can you imagine someone trying to break this down as a progressive story? I mean, how many times do you get thrown into the pit? How many times does the devil get loosed out of the bottomless pit for a brief period of time, for a brief period of time, for a brief period of time? And it really is just a very powerful thing to be able to have this all broken down to where that we are looking at it through the parameters that is set by the book itself. Again, we didn't set these parameters. So I guess what I want to say to you as we're closing out here is, you know, when you press the off button and you stop this, just sit back and go, wow, thank you, Jesus. Because this is indeed the power of your sacrifice, of your own self. No one imposed the cross on Jesus. It was the will of his Father, but he was the one who made the choice to go through with this.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Jesus. Hey guys, I think most of you are beginning to see the huge payoff we're getting from our absolute commitment to the Hebrew Scriptures. And some people might say, why? We're in the new covenant. I go to churches that they won't even read from the Hebrew Scriptures. They say, that's the old, that's done away with. No, it is fulfilled. What was done away with was because the Scriptures were fulfilled. The Hebrew Scriptures were fulfilled. Therefore, many things were done away with. Don't ever say the Hebrew Scriptures are done away with. They have never been done away with. They are still there. Look in your Bible, they're still there. But you see, the Hebrew Scriptures told us the things that would come to end. But the Hebrew Scriptures will never come to end. And if they've come to end by the teachers that you're listening to, stop listening to those teachers. When people start denying the Hebrew Scriptures, it means that they want to teach something they can't prove. Yeah, let me say that again. When people start denying and refuting and undermining the Hebrew scriptures, what they are saying is we have no foundation whatsoever to be teaching what we're teaching. And that's Christian and mystic alike. Somehow Christianity got it all mixed up and thought that the scriptures were passed away. The scriptures were gone, that the scriptures had been done away with. No, the scriptures told us about the things that would be done away with. Stick with the scriptures and stick with supporting Mike Williams Ministries and the Gospel Revolution because, gosh, keep listening. You'll see why.